Hello and welcome to episode 102 of Third and Wrong. I'm your co-host, Stephen Bullen, and with me as always is Austin Dowlonga. Austin, our first kind of recap regular episode in a while. We had our interview with Shane Richards for episode 100, and then our interview with Kelsey Fender, episode 101. Really great interviews. If you haven't checked them out, go check them out now. But we have some things to catch up on. I mean, my head's spinning. Originally, we were just going to come in here and talk some free agent recap, and then Dak got extended, and then the CFL and XFL entered talks, and we're going to get to all that. But first of all, Ozzy, how are things?
Things are really good. I forgot that we introduced, and maybe this is not good that I'm admitting this on the pod, but I forgot that we introduced our new intro music, and I had tuned into our last episode just to take a gander, and sure enough, that was a banger. So we're getting. I love it. I can jam out to that. I wish I could just put it on repeat. I would listen to that for an hour instead of us talking.
Right. Like, and I'm not even like hyping this up. And if you want to check out the beat, it's if you go to episode 100 show notes, we introduced it and we tagged Northern Confidential TC, who developed the beat for us, the intro beat. But when I first put it on episode 100, I like to listen back to the episodes like in the vehicle or something just to see how it sounds, a little quality assurance. I kid you not, I like went and spaced back like 30 seconds. I don't know how many times just to listen to the intro beat again before I finally listened to the episode, because it was just like, it's groovy. I'm gonna like make it sound not cool now the more I talk about it. But I mean, if you guys like it, let us know and we'll let TC know, because he put a lot of time into that, and we're thankful.
Yeah.
Another thing that what's that, Ozzy?
I was just gonna say, yeah, we're definitely overhyping it probably, but I mean, you've got your intro song when it gets you so amped up. It's like, yeah, this is us.
This is us.
Third and Wrong.
And if you go back to our first episode, it used to be like that little the sample beat, just the stock beat that they gave you on whatever one platform we used, Zencaster. RIP, they failed us too many times, so now we use Zoom. All right, so another thing that took a lot of time, like developing the beat, was Daks Extension. This has been a couple years in the making, and wow, did it ever turn out well for Dak? He got a 4-year extension worth $160 million, 126 of that guaranteed, $66 million signing bonus, the largest in NFL history, and he's going to make $75 million his first year, but his cap hit is only going to be 22 million, 22.1, I believe. So we're no salary cap experts here. I mean, I'm sure everyone's figured that out by now if you've listened to all 102 episodes of Third and Wrong. But what I can say is that Dak really and his agent played this perfectly. They were patient. They bet on themselves. And unfortunately, Dak had that devastating ankle injury to end the year. But I mean, that just goes to show that the franchise tag is just not a great sustainable way to operate your franchise, because even from the player's perspective, yeah, you get paid like a top 10 player at your position for that year, but you face a devastating injury like Dak. And thankfully for Dak, he's a proven entity. I mean, a lot of players that get tagged, I mean, they had a breakout year and they're looking to cash in. Like, that's going to be the one chance they get to, make the majority of their money, get that big contract. And, they face a devastating injury and that's over. Dak has a chance to get another big payday at 31 years old when his contract's up. So, I mean, he played this so perfectly. I mean, Jerry Jones has the money, but I mean, why wouldn't you have done this a year ago? What were your initial thoughts when you saw this, Ozzy?
My first initial thought was, holy crap, he still got what he wanted. After an injury like that, it seemed like the Cowboys were playing hardball, and they were adamant on getting that 5th year on that contract, and at a little bit lesser of a average annual value. But turns out it didn't matter. They saw what they had when they didn't have Dak in the starting lineup, and sure enough, I guess they decided to just go all in on it. And to average 40 million a year, that was just, I know that's not how the cap hits ever work, not like in hockey, but it's just insane that he still gets the 40 million after all of that. I don't know if there's really any rhyme or reason why contracts are the way that they are at this point. Like, normally, I would have thought that would have meant we would at least see the tag one more year to see how Dak would perform, or if it would mean, okay, well, the Cowboys might offer him a little bit less, but give him that long-term security of a 4 or 5 year deal, but at like 33 million average. But nope, still got the 40 million. And it just kind of, like you said earlier, Steve, it kind of makes you wonder why they didn't just do this earlier, because if the Cowboys were going to end up folding, what did they need to see? Is this what they needed to see over the course of the year without Dak in the lineup to know that he's their guy? If that's the case, I mean, it worked out, but otherwise they might have just overspent if they would have just done it last year.
And it's kind of funny to talk about this because I think this was a big discussion 2 years ago. I remember talking about this in our first couple of episodes, and then we talked about it again last year, like a year ago now. And we all foolishly, I think every single me, you, and Zach said that this offense could run just as smooth with Andy Dalton as it could with Dak Prescott.
I was so hyped on Andy Dalton.
I know,
too.
and I'm so fucking embarrassed that we thought that. And our sincere apologies, Dak, if we ever cross paths, that we ever thought that. And I thought Andy Dalton would have had I'm not going to get into it. It was just a bad take by all of us. We were wrong across the board. And, I wasn't the biggest Dak fan for the first couple of years. I thought Wentz was even better, another miss by me. But Dak just really, like, even though he broke his ankle, when I saw him in that game against Seattle just slinging it, and I saw him like just put this offense on his back, or this team on his back through those first couple of weeks, I really just changed my perception of Dak. I was like, he can really carry a franchise. And do I think he's a top 5 quarterback? No, but I think it'd be foolish to put him outside the 6 to 10 range. And now the attention shifts to the defense, and they got Dan Quinn there as the defensive coordinator. It's going to look very similar to the kind of defense they ran in Atlanta, what he ran in Seattle, a lot of cover 3. So I think they're going to have to really get the secondary to play that kind of style. And if they can, that seems to me more like a 2-year project. And you maybe try to get another year or 2 out of Zeke. This team could be front runners for the division. I picked them to go 11-5 and win the division last year. That obviously didn't happen. I might run it back with that same prediction, because now with a healthy Dak and a hopefully improved defense, this Cowboys team should be on its way to contention. Is that what you kind of see for their future, Ozzy?
Yeah, I think so. And seeing Dak with, even though their offense kind of sputtered at the beginning of games last year to start and up until Dak's injury, it was just incredible to see the potential of what was there when they would always storm back in those games. It was incredible that they would go down so big in like a handful of games that they had played with Dak. And they came back and made it a game against Atlanta where they actually won, and the Browns where they almost won, and they were down by a 27 or something like that in the fourth. It's like, holy crap, Dak has that potential there. The thing that I could see hindering them from that 11-5 record that you have there, Steve, if you do finalize that, would be the offensive line, which saying that about the Cowboys is really, it seems weird, but we saw last year when they were injured, nobody was able to stay healthy on the offensive line. And how are they able to come back from that? That's kind of the big question mark right now. I think that obviously you want to focus on the defense with whatever cap space you have, but at the same time, you need to keep your quarterback, who you're now paying a boatload of money to, upright and healthy. And you got to invest in the offensive line too. So I'm really excited to see, and we'll get to the free agents, but just to see how this free agency shakes out for the Cowboys, because are they going to allocate a lot of money to the defense? They don't have a lot to really work with. I think it's 15 million or something like that. And there's a lot of good offensive linemen on the free agent market right now. So how they do that, do their diligence on that, I'm very eager to see.
Likewise, my friend. Speaking of free agency, let's talk about some of the biggest names that'll be available. We're not going to mention the guys who are tagged, because Ozzy and I were talking pre-show, and a lot of the guys that get tagged, it's very rare they'll get released, and if they do, it's not till the summertime where it's like, okay, an agreement can't be reached, and like there's that deadline in the summer where it's like, okay, you have to sign your franchise tag or you get released into free agency. So pending free agents, we got Kenny Golladay, Trent Williams, Anthony Harris, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Joe Thuney. Am I saying that right, Ozzy?
Yep.
I always want to say Thuney. Richard Sherman, Wow, I slurred that. Juju Smith-Schuster, Corey Linsley, Shaquille Griffin, and Chris Carson, just to name a few. And if I'm missing your favorite player, I'm sorry. But, you know, a lot of big names here. And I'll maybe just start with the ones I'm familiar with. Shaquille Griffin and Chris Carson. Seattle didn't franchise tag either of them, to no surprise. They only dealing with $15 million in cap space after releasing Carlos Dunlap. So that was quite a shock to many Seahawks fans. And Shaquille Griffin played his college football in Florida. So I can potentially see him going to Jacksonville or Miami if they were to need that defensive help. Jacksonville more than Miami is a fit for him. And then I was saying last year, the Bears, if they want more of an aggressive running game going after Chris Carson. Now I have no idea what their cap situation looks like pre or post potential Russell Wilson trade, which we'll get to that later. But those are the two big names I see. I could see Chris Carson going to the Bears. I could see Shaquille Griffin going to one of the Florida teams, mainly Jacksonville. I can potentially see there. I don't know how much he's going to want to get paid, but Seattle clearly doesn't want to pay him more than 11, 12 million per year. And a team with a lot of cap like Jacksonville looking to just kind of shore up in some positions can maybe shell that out for what I think is an above average corner, but not a great corner. And Richard Sherman, a lot of murmurs that he could potentially be reuniting in Seattle. I would love that. You know, maybe can make that move to safety, you know, as many aging corners do towards the end of their career. But also there's been talks of him going and reuniting with Robert Saleh in New York. Ozzy, some names on that list. Why don't you start with Joe Thuney? Is it likely the Patriots will resign him? You guys have the cap room, 66 million roughly.
Yeah, I don't think we are going to. He's one of the most versatile offensive linemen in the league, being able to play. He actually played for, I think, all three positions for us last year. And I know he played tackle a little bit and obviously guard. That's his main position. But if he didn't play center last year, he did the year before when David Andrews, who's also a free agent, was out with blood clots in his lungs. And he came back last year and played excellent too. So to lose Joe Thuney, like, he's as good as gone in my mind. I just know it. I'm just preparing myself. He's such a fun guy to cheer for. He just looks like he has such a blast on the field too. He's just got like a teddy bear face. You just kind of want to give him a hug. So Joe Thuney, if you want to come on the pod, we'll and show the audience what I'm talking about here. So I don't sound like I'm just man crushing on you. But a little bit. And David Andrews, same thing. But man, it's going to be there's a plethora of good offensive linemen in this free agent class. And Eric Fisher is another one to add to the list.
Yeah, just released
today. And
it's going to be great when
the Jags, who might be on the chopping block. So yeah,
it's going to be great when Seattle targets none of them and goes bargain bin hunting just to further piss off Russell Wilson.
God.
Man. And yeah, like another that's been like Joe Thuney's been linked to Seattle, but that's mostly just been through hopeful Seattle bloggers and fans like myself. Another name that's been linked to Seattle has been Jonnu Smith. Seattle obviously needing a couple more tight ends if they're going to be running more 12 personnel. That's one running back, two tight ends under Shane Waldron's system, which he's adopting from. I'm assuming he's going to be implementing a lot of what he ran in with the Los Angeles Rams. And then there's what's that other guy? Gerald Everett, I think, also a free agent tight end. Hunter Henry. What's that?
I was going to say that's kind of sounds more of a Seattle guy, not Jonnu Smith. He's going to cost way too much for Seattle.
Yeah. And Hunter Henry, I haven't heard like of any like teams that he could be potentially linked to. Have you heard where some of these marquee tight ends like Smith or Henry will be going?
This is going to be kind of a easy answer, but for me, I've seen a lot of reporters and whatnot link these tight ends to the Patriots. Tight end is a very it's actually such a bad need and for us, and it's just we're desperate at this point. So I'm not surprised, but that's kind of the top one. And then there's teams like the Jaguars who also need a tight end desperately. But those are the two off the top of my head. I'm really banking on Jonnu Smith or Hunter Henry coming to New England. Bill Belichick has hyped both of them up. So, I mean, if we get both, that would be kind of cool too. If we just want to throw money at them both, Bill, I'd be on board with that. We need all the help we can get, but anyways, that's neither here nor there.
And one person we didn't list off, Cam Newton, coming off a pretty disappointing season, but Bill Belichick still speaks very highly of him, was a great locker room guy, despite what happens at any of his camps with kids mouthing him off, which I find totally out of pocket. Like, that's just, you don't disrespect Cam Newton. He's a former NFL MVP. But, that connection with Greg Olsen in Carolina was something very special back in his prime. And I think if you were to bluster that tight end group and bring Cam Newton back and potentially draft a good receiver this time, you could be looking at a more dynamic offense than what we saw with, Cam Newton last year. And we'll obviously get into some draft stuff in the next couple of weeks. We're looking forward to having Tomac back on for our mock draft special right before the draft. But there's a lot of potential there with the Patriots and that amount of cap room. And Bill took that squad with a lot of COVID opt-outs to a 7-9 record. I'm very fearful of what this Patriots team will look like in September of 2021. Be that Cam Newton at quarterback, people, Zach will likely laugh, but I will be very fearful, and rightfully so. Corey Linsley looks like he's on his way out of Green Bay. Again, another name linked to Seattle, but not officially, just mostly fingers crossed. But he'll be getting a big payday. I think he's looking to become the highest paid center in the league. And Kenny Golladay, that was a surprising release from the Detroit Lions. Marvin Jones, also a free agent. So some marquee former Detroit receivers, they look like they're hitting the full reset there. So Jared Goff's going to have no one to throw to. So that's fantastic for them. But they've
got no cap either, though.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be tough. So, and they've also released their slot corner, Justin Coleman, who they made the highest paid nickel corner in the league just a couple of years ago. So a lot of wrongdoings to be undone there from the previous regime. Speaking of rebuilding teams, Ozzy, let's maybe make a transition to some of the teams we saw last year. We covered in one of our episodes. We saw the Panthers, Dolphins, Raiders, and there's one more team we covered that had some pretty significant turnarounds in a short period of time. I mean, we saw Miami nearly miss the playoffs at the 10-6 record. The Raiders went 7-9, and the Panthers were very competitive. And then the wheels kind of came off towards the end of their run here. So going into this year, there's some teams with a top 10 picks and one with no first or second round pick here, but we have the Texans, the Jets, the Jaguars, and the Lions. Ozzy, which team out of these four do you see potentially having a Miami Dolphins type season? Maybe not of this year, but the year before, where they rattled off, 7 of the last 8 or something. But which team do you see having the quickest turnaround here? Which team has the longest road ahead, just based on early regime changes?
Yeah, so I think the one with the toughest battle, I'll start there, is definitely Detroit. I think that they're already a lock for top 2 pick next year. Just because I look at their cap situation, I look at their roster, it's really not the greatest. They've got 5 picks, all from rounds 1 through 5. So you get some decent quality picks there, but they bring in Jared Goff, which everybody's kind of got their doubts on at this point, rightfully so. But they don't really have any weapons. They've got a lot of holes on their roster, especially on offense there now, with all their wide receivers, all their good wide receivers being priced out of their. I mean, they did sign Tyrell Williams, so there's that, but he's no Marvin Jones or Kenny Golladay. They're sitting at around a 700,000 cap space right now, and with a roster that has a bunch of holes. So they've definitely got the longest road ahead. And as much as people wanted to poke at Dan Campbell, his opening press conference with biting the kneecaps off, I think that I'm eager to give this guy a chance. I guess I could have said the Texans too. We don't even know what's going on there, so I don't want to speculate too much on their spot. But as far as the team or did you have anything to add there before I go into that?
Yeah, I think with the Lions is you hit it on the head there. They're not a lot of cap room. And I think the picks that they might or projected are to make with the number 7th pick, it could be a future move. They could be drafting a quarterback who might not see the field for a year because you're giving Jared Goff that chance to be the bridge quarterback. And so, right, those kind of draft chances aren't going to pay off for the long run. I've seen some mocks of them taking another corner or potentially a linebacker, and their linebacking core does need a lot of help. But I think right now you just got to build for the future and getting that franchise quarterback. I mean, they passed up on Tua last year. They passed up on, well, if Joe Burrow went first. They met Justin Herbert, I believe, would have still been there at, where did they take him at 3? They took Okuda at 3, correct?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. So, I mean, and these are things that, like, I know the previous regime was banking on, succeeding and not having to worry about rebuilding this fast. Obviously, they're all fired now, but these are the kind of forward-thinking moves I think franchises miss out on. And when you miss out on a franchise quarterback like Justin Herbert or Tua, and Okuda, I think will be a very fine corner for them, but I think you have to take a quarterback at 7 for these guys, and if not, then what are we doing, right? You have Jared Goff, and there's no guarantee where you'll end up in the top 5 or 10 next year. Maybe Jared Goff goes off, and all of a sudden you're kind of linked to him because you can't draft a quarterback, or a top tier quarterback anyway. So I agree. I think they have the longest road back. The Texans obviously are in a world of hurt. They just signed Mark Ingram, which should inspire absolutely no one in that fan base. I don't think there's much, if any, tread left on those tires. And Deshaun Watson, we still don't know what's going to happen there. I think they seem to be playing hardball. They're not going to want to trade him. So that one, but I think a quick turnaround is going to be the Jaguars. I really like what they've installed there with Urban Meyer. Brian Schottenheimer as their pass game coordinator, Darrell Bevel as their offensive coordinator. I think those are really smart offensive minds to link with Urban Meyer. And Urban Meyer has, based on what I'm reading, has very diverse offensive systems. He doesn't have his one, like he runs spread or he runs X. I mean, he's had so many different quarterbacks in his time at Ohio State. And then he coached Tim Tebow at Florida. I mean, just so many diverse quarterbacks that I think Trevor Lawrence, who kind of encompasses all those great traits of a lot of great quarterbacks getting compared to Andrew Luck, can come in and really thrive, and they're going to build that offense around him. He's not going to have to fit into this power run scheme or this zone run scheme or this air raid scheme. So I think they're going to have a quick turnaround. It's just that defense, but they have the cap room to apply to the defense. They franchise tag Cam Robinson, who I think, kind of anchors that line for them. And then the Jets aren't too far behind. I really like what Robert Saleh is going to do there. I just think in order to run his defensive scheme successfully, like he did in San Francisco, he needs a lot of talent. And there's no Joey Bosa on that defensive line right now. So it's going to take some time to, replenish the talent there, so Saleh can be his motivating self to a team that actually has, guys ready to rock and roll. Which team do you have having the quickest turnaround?
Yeah, you took the wind right out of my sails there, Steve.
Oh.
I'm right there with you with the Jags, for a lot of the reasons that you had mentioned too. And they're just totally, the Jets have cap space too, but with the Jags having the first overall pick, they are basically a lock to get Trevor Lawrence. And I've heard a lot of people at this point, even a lot of our listeners probably know that he's like the best prospect since Andrew Luck, I guess. So I don't watch a lot of college football, but I just take their word for it.
If Twitter says it's true, it has to be.
Exactly. Yeah. Everything on Twitter is true. So, so they're poised to get their quarterback. The Jets still, we don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to get Zach Wilson, or are they going to stick with Sam Darnold and build around him?
Or Justin Fields.
A little bit, or Justin Fields. Yeah. There's still a little bit of uncertainty there. So it's hard to say that they're just a lock to turn it around quickly. I do really, really like the potential with this Jags team, though. You get a quarterback in there that's going to elevate that offense. He's going to be a little bit more exciting than Gardner Minshew, even though the jean shorts were really exciting. It just didn't translate into good play all the time. And then it's a good time to have needs where the Jags have needs, like wide receiver. We already know that there's a plethora of wide receivers out there that are good. They can fix up the O-line, the interior O-line if they need to. And then tight end is a desperate need, as I mentioned. So there's a couple of good corners that have come on the market too, and safeties. Keanu Neal is one that's on there freshly, and Malcolm Butler, even though he's up there in age, he would still be a good presence, I think. And there's a multitude of others that could address that defense, but they've got the picks. They've got 5 picks in the top 100. So, I mean, you've got a guy who all he did was recruit down in college. And we saw with Pete Carroll too. Sorry to go on a rant here.
Go for it.
But Pete Carroll had a lot of success drafting out, like when he came back to the NFL, because of presumably because of his connections with players in the in the college ranks. So to have a guy like Urban Meyer, who was so successful in the college ranks, and to be able to have recruited a lot of these guys that are now coming up in the draft, he's got a little bit of a leg up, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, that paid so many great dividends for Seattle with Pete Carroll's experience coming out of USC. I mean, even though Richard Sherman didn't play for Pete Carroll at USC, he went to Stanford. Pete Carroll recruited Sherman and actually got to know him coming out of high school. And, as people can go back and look at Seattle's 2010, 2011, and 2012 drafts, that set the stage for, the run they're still kind of on today. I mean, they haven't had a losing season in 10 years. So, I mean, sure, there hasn't been multiple Super Bowls, but I mean, aside from Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, no team really has had a lot of multiple Super Bowls. But we've also seen with Seattle, those drafts kind of fall off as Pete was more and more removed from the college scene. And maybe that's more on their scouting department than an indictment on Pete. But I totally agree. I think for Urban Meyer, if they can nail these first 3 drafts, and then you obviously have Trevor Lawrence, I think it sets the table well going into the future. You mentioned Keanu Neal, which I forgot to mention in the list of free agents, but totally off topic. I could totally see him reuniting with Dan Quinn in Dallas. So I think that'd be great. I don't know what kind of defense the Jaguars are going to run. They hired a pretty obscure guy who I'm just not sure what they're going to be running, a 4-3 or a 3-4, but be interesting to see either way. And I think that's going to be really exciting. I hope the Falcons draft Justin Fields, by the way. I think that'd be good for them, but we'll get to that another time. I see you looking something up, Ozzy. You're confirming what their DC is.
I was just trying to look who the DC was. Yeah. All that shows up is Cullen.
Yeah. Something Cullen.
Nice. Joe Cullen.
Joe Cullen. Yeah. And I'm not sure, he's relatively unknown as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Another team that we're going to transition to here is the Chicago Bears. They're moving off of MVP Mitch Trubisky, and a lot of rumors of Russell Wilson. Obviously, we saw Russell's 4 teams: the Raiders, the Cowboys, the Saints, and the Bears. Well, the Saints have no cap room and no desirable picks for Seattle. The Cowboys just re-signed Dak, and the Raiders are dismantling their offensive line. So it looks like all eyes are on the Chicago Bears. And they have the blue chip talent that they could trade back, like Khalil Mack. They have a quarterback they could trade back, like Nick Foles. And they have some decent draft picks, pick number 20. I still wouldn't trade Russell Wilson for any of that, but it's looking possible now. There's a lot of betting sites that have taken Russell Wilson. I don't know how this all works, but they've taken him off like their season projections, and they say they only do that when something imminent is about to happen. So as Colin Cowherd says, Vegas knows. So Vegas knows something's up, then I'm pretty nervous myself. They must have some inside word on what's happening, but I can't believe it's gotten to this point, honestly. And I was hoping maybe Pete and Russ could just sit down and hash it out like men do and like people do, but it just seems like that they're past that point, and Pete wants to play his style of football and Russell wants to play his style of football, and Russell wants more stay in the organization, but Pete essentially is running the entire organization. Since Paul Allen unfortunately passed away, his sister and his estate have been very hands-off, and Pete is the vice president of football operations. So John Schneider reports to him.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
John Schneider is the general manager, but Pete's the vice president of football operations. So it's kind of like it goes Pete, John, Pete, with Pete is the head coach underneath. So,
no.
Yeah, I mean, a good saying I heard is, John Schneider doesn't put anything in the grocery cart that Pete doesn't want. So that's just the way it's kind of run. And I mean, we'll see how this plays out with free agency. We'll know pretty quickly if they're adhering to Russell's demands, if they're signing Jamarcus Webb at right tackle, or if they're going making run at Joe Thuney or Corey Linsley. So do you have any thoughts on this, Ozzy? I mean, what would be your reaction if Russell went to the Bears? Are the Bears instant Super Bowl contenders, or in your mind, are they no better off than what Seattle was just this past year for a wild card exit?
Oh, no, I think the Bears would be Super Bowl contenders instantly, just because they've got, even though their defense isn't what it was about 2 years ago or so, it's still really, really good. And not only that, I just feel like their offense with Matt Nagy is a little bit more explosive and more along the lines of what Russ would prefer. And his ability to, Russell Wilson has one of the nicest deep balls in the league. And if you keep Allen Robinson and get, I don't know who else they would really need at this point. Like they've got quite a good base, I would say. And then you can add some minor pieces in free agency because it's not like they'd be able to draft much. They're probably going to give up a couple drafts. They could give up this year's draft entirely for Russell Wilson. It'd still be worth it, even though he's 32. But yeah, I think that the Bears would be instant Super Bowl contenders, to put that in a long roundabout way. The Seahawks, I don't know what you could get excited about. It would be a rebuild, a tear down and rebuild. But right now, you guys kind of seem stuck in a purgatory anyways, right? It's just with Russ, you're not even winning playoff games. So what? And that's with an explosive talent like DK Metcalf, and you had a decent tandem of running backs, a defense that really came on in the second half of the season. What more do you need? So it maybe would be a good time to reboot while Russell's value is still really, really high.
The only problem with rebooting at this point is Pete's 70 or turning 71. And I just don't know if he's interested in really doing that. Like they, even in 2017, after Sherman and Chancellor and Cliff Averill and Michael Bennett all left the building, they never used the word rebuild. They called it a retooling or a refiguring. And their 2018 rebuild season, what was supposed to be, like, people were predicting them to go 4-12. They go 10-6, and of course losing the wild card round. But I just think this team right now is a product of some failed drafts from 2017, or, we talked about how good 2010 through 2012 was. I mean, everything since 2013 has been pretty off. 2015 was okay. They got Tyler Lockett and Frank Clark. 2017, they got Chris Carson in the 7th round and David Moore in the 7th round. You got Shaquille Griffin in 2017. So, I mean, there's been some hits. You got DK Metcalf in 2019, but as a whole, there's been no, they drafted Hall of Famer after Hall of Famer in that 3-year stretch. And since then, it's just been, they've hit some above average to potentially really great players, like obviously DK Metcalf. But I think for them, and to hit the rebuild button when you don't have first round picks this year or next year, that's also tough as well. So it's just, I think they're going to want to somehow compete. And if Russell Wilson's out of the building, I think they're going to look at a Nick Foles or a, God forbid, Mitch Trubisky, or potentially they take that 20th pick and they take a Mac Jones. And if he's still on the board, if the Patriots haven't taken him at 15, and maybe they get in front of the Saints and they take a rookie quarterback and they keep everything else in place and they play Pete ball, they run the football, Shane Waldron's scheme, they spoon feed Mac Jones just like they spoon fed Jared Goff, and you hope to claw your way to a 10-6 record and try to upset some teams, right? And you hope that defense kind of takes that next step. But now they don't have a pass rush because Carlos Dunlap is released. So it's just really, I mean, we could do a whole episode on the dysfunction in Seattle, but Russell Wilson to an extent has really masked it, but he's also not without his flaws as well. And he was definitely to blame for his subpar play down the stretch. Pete didn't take the ball away from him. A lot of stats will show that they threw the ball just as much, but or if not just a little less, but not like to the extent where everyone's thinking they were running the I formation again after Russell's turnover spell. But I digress.
Yeah.
Hopefully when we come on next week, Russell Wilson isn't a Chicago Bear, but it's kind of looking like it's trending that way.
Yeah, I was going to add too that the Seahawks won their Super Bowl when Russell Wilson was on a rookie deal. So maybe getting rid of him, Pete wouldn't see it as a full-on rebuild. He still could see it as a retool. Maybe that's, if he's looking at it from all angles here, maybe that's what he's kind of thinking is, well, if we're going to get rid of him and get a boatload of draft picks, maybe it's worth doing that and then getting a quarterback on a rookie deal. Because yeah, like Colin had a segment a couple days ago or yesterday even, where he's talking about the highest paid quarterbacks, and not the top 5 paid quarterbacks or something like that haven't won a Super Bowl in quite some time. It's always been like a cheaper quarterback or a quarterback taking a discount. So
yeah, I think the thing with that though is it's more has to do with like Seattle's mismanagement. Last year they had $55 million in cap space and they signed Bruce Irvin and Brandon Shell were their 2 biggest signings. I mean, they did nothing to address the pass rush. And so it's things like that where it's like, yeah, Russell Wilson's making 35 a year and his cap hit is dead money this year. It'd be 39 million if they traded him. But it's not like Seattle has $700,000 in cap space. They had 55 million last year. I read an article today. They can take their 15 million of cap space and they can turn that into 66 million through various extensions. They can extend Jamal Adams. They can extend Bobby Wagner. They can extend Quandre Diggs. And sure, it's going to kind of kick the can down the road as far as having to deal with the cap space, but your Super Bowl window is right now. And so to appease Russell Wilson, you extend these players, you get yourself $66 million of cap room, and you make Joe Thuney the highest paid guard in NFL history, and you make Corey Lindsey the highest paid center in NFL history. And then you go get a true number 3 receiver, not David Moore. You go get Juju Smith-Schuster or an Adam Humphries, and you give Russell Wilson the ball, and you go rock and roll. And you get yourself a pass rusher. If that means bringing back Jadeveon Clowney or Carlos Dunlap, you go do those things because it's all possible. It's the math works out, but they're just not. They like to they've always bargain shop. That's always been their game. They like to go shop at the dollar store. They don't want to go to the Gucci store. And that's probably a terrible analogy. And that's no disrespect to anyone that shops at the dollar store. I go to the dollar store, but this is an NFL franchise trying to win a Super Bowl. I'm just a guy looking for a new pair of boxers. So
it's funny that you say they've been kind of cheaper, and we've been able to discuss in our other group chats and stuff like that, that Russell Wilson's going to have kind of a Aaron Rodgers type of career trajectory. And it's no coincidence that both of the teams that have these quarterbacks don't spend in free agency. And they only have, I think Aaron Rodgers only has 1 Super Bowl too. Is that correct?
Yeah. 2010. And you totally hit it on the money. Like the Packers for years have never spent in free agency. They might not even pay Aaron Jones, who they drafted. Usually when you draft good players and they end up being really good, you like to re-sign those players.
And Corey Linsley.
They drafted him too. And then JJ Watt's available, who's from Wisconsin, but no, he doesn't fit our budget. Well, I mean, you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now, like they're looking to add another star. It's just these teams just kind of get set in their ways and they're very traditional. And I just don't think the NFL right now is trending that way. You need to be aggressive and take advantage of your Super Bowl windows. And Seattle and Green Bay have both not done that. So
the NFL is not very innovative. It's not very young. And speaking of which, we're going to transition into the XFL came out, and the CFL came out and said that they are looking at collaborating. I stole the thunder from you, Steve,
segue. That's okay, man. I had to
segue while I was talking about it.
There you go.
So yeah, the CFL, XFL come out and mentioned some form of collaboration, partnership / merger relationship. We don't know yet. Still very early. Steve, I know you had a lot to say on Twitter. Let's take our listeners through what your thoughts were on.
Yeah.
This.
So the first thing I saw was it just blew my mind. I think Tristan sent it in the group chat, and it was just like a screenshot from TSN's Instagram account. So the first thing I go to do first thing I said is holy shit in the group chat, and then I went to Twitter. And I see all these reports are confirmed that the CFL and XFL are entering talks. And so I'll admit I was very reactionary. I thought, oh my God, are they merging? I mean, are we going to see the Rough Riders play the Tampa Bay Vipers? Are like all these things going through my mind? Is this the end of 3-down football as we know it? And the truth be told, we don't know anything right now. I mean, the CFL has it more under the radar, has agreements with the Mexican Football League and I believe the Finnish Football League. And to kind of create a funnel of the global initiative, CFL 2.0. And I think there's a lot of more smart people than me on Twitter saying that this could just be an extension of that, a partnership where they're able to potentially help each other out, share ideas, potentially create a pipeline of players who do want to play football year round. I mean, me and you talked to Keon Raymond a couple months ago. That's very hard on the body to play football year round. He went from the Arena League right to the CFL, but there could potentially be grounds for that. But what makes me think it's more than that, this is kind of more of the irrational reactionary side of me, is that the XFL has paused their plans for a 2022 season until these talks have taken place. And so that makes me wonder if there's potentially more to it than just sharing ideas on how to get a greater reach on social media. And so I'm approaching this from two sides. On one end, I'm very traditionalist, like CFL, Canadian game. And, this podcast is and this blog is a big, our end goal is to grow the Canadian game from the grassroots up. And, if it grows up into a area where there's no longer Canadian football, well, obviously that puts us in a compromising position as well. So I, in a way, do want to see the Canadian game preserved to a degree, but the XFL at the same time can also feed into that. You know, the XFL likes to be different. We saw their kickoff rules and their point after rules. And they could probably look at the CFL and say, hey, these guys have been doing this for years. They have the history, they have the infrastructure all set up. And maybe that's where potentially, if the leagues do merge, the Canadian game can remain intact. So I'm looking at it from that way. I've also thought of a scenario where the CFL plays their league year, the XFL plays their league year, so they could still crown a Grey Cup champion. You can still crown an XFL champion. And then you have some kind of like inter-conference, kind of like how Kelsey described. Remember how like they travel to Ontario, they play by the 4-down rules that they play in Ontario. And then when the championship game's hosted in Alberta, they play by the Canadian rules hosted in Alberta. Maybe you do that on a grand scale, right? And back in the 60s or 50s, you saw the AFL play the NFL until they merged into one league. Maybe these never fully merge, but you also have like a competitive all-star game, so to speak. But it's not an all-star game. It's the Grey Cup champion versus the XFL champion, and they clash once a year, rotate US, Canada, and away you go. So, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. The guy next door's guess is as good as mine. And Randy Ambrosi and The Rock's guess is probably as good as mine, because they haven't started talking yet. They just said they're going to talk about talking. And so it's good publicity for the CFL, because I think the CFL has totally missed marketing to an entire generation. I saw a really depressing tweet today that said a lot of the players that they're interviewing for the CFL draft were asked if they grew up watching CFL football, and virtually all of them said no. That's a problem. So if you're potentially a CFL draftee and you're listening to this podcast, that's good, because we talk a lot of CFL here. So hopefully, if you haven't watched a lot of CFL, you tune in, because potentially could be the league you're playing in. So we'll obviously have to step up our XFL coverage as well, which we talked about when it was still a thing. Got shut down.
Exactly. Yeah. I was a diehard DC Defenders fan, probably one of their top
Seattle
fans.
Dragons, baby. Yeah, let's do it. And actually, fun fact, a year ago, March 11th, as of recording today, the NBA and everything as we knew it shut down. So okay, happy 1 year, whatever the fuck this last year's been. Happy 1 year. So Ozzy, what were your initial thoughts? I feel like I've rambled on long enough and somehow transitioned into talking about COVID, but here we are.
No, that's all good. COVID is life at this point. We're a year in, and I'm surprised there's still cars, like there's still gas filling up our cars, and we're not in a post-apocalyptic type of environment.
Still toilet paper on the shelves, baby. It's more than we could say last year at this time. So
let's go. But yeah, no, I shared a lot of the same thoughts as you, and kind of the one thing that I felt like I was getting dragged into it more, just reading more and more people's reactions. But the thought of losing 3-down football kind of got to me a little bit. I was like, oh, that would be a big change. But at the same time, is that really going to, it's definitely going to have an impact on the way that we view Canadian stats and prior games and stuff like that. But if that was a decision that was made in order to grow both the CFL and the XFL together, I would be for it, because I think the CFL has definitely stagnated to a large extent. And we've spoken about it before, both on the podcast and privately, about how the league was, a lot of the teams are actually losing money. A majority of the CFL teams lose money every year. And it's just not very, it hasn't been very profitable. And so that's a very sad reality, but they do need to look at all possible causes to grow.
People don't realize how much trouble the CFL's in right now. Like, they need financial backing to pull off this 2021 season if they want to play it in full. And I don't know if they have it right now. So it's all 9 owners, because the CFL isn't owned by a single entity. All 9 teams are individually owned. And so everyone is always like, well, The Rock can just buy the CFL. Well, no, he can. He'd have to negotiate with every single team and come to an agreement to purchase, which would be a freaking legal nightmare. I can't even say it right. That's how much of a nightmare it is. So one of the players we've had on the podcast, we were talking, and he said he'd be all for it, but he wants the Canadian game to remain intact. He'd want to keep the Canadian rules. And he's actually an American player. So he says it's more fun, enjoys the game more than the NFL rules, just as a fan perspective watching it. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of CFL players would be open to the idea of merging, but I think, you also had guys like Zach Collaros and Trevor Harris come out and speak very in favor of the Canadian game and the history and maintaining those rules as well. So again, it's all very early, and I'm 50-50. I'm open to them merging because I think I want to see the continuation of CFL football exist. And for those that just want to remain status quo, I mean, we're not going to have a league in a couple of years if we remain status quo, and maybe a couple of years is even like 1 or 2. And so something has to change. And I mean, people were asking for the CFL. We were asking the CFL for a new business model. I mean, here it might be in front of us. So.
Exactly. You can't, people were speculating different business models and stuff like that. And this is just one of those opportunities. So maybe that's something to pounce on. I think that the connection to the US market in terms of TV and whatnot would really benefit the CFL. That's something that hasn't been, it's been touched on Twitter and stuff by the people that are a little bit more in the know, but again, not really. Hasn't really been much actual talking. It's just been talking about talking. But yeah, I think that would help both leagues definitely getting because the XFL obviously had the ability to get TV ratings on these bigger networks right from the start. They were getting it when in their first year, and so yeah, it was kind of. So for this, CFL to benefit from that, I think that would be huge. It would be cool if the XFL, because they're so young and they're open-minded just in the way that they've created their structure and their rules, it would be cool if the XFL switched to 3-down football.
Right.
And then rather than this, and then the CFL really truly keeps its history, its differences. And the XFL has nothing to lose by doing that. They haven't really established themselves at all. And here, this is just me speculating out loud, but that would be really cool. The XFL do that.
And how cool would it be, like Cody Fajardo and the Saskatchewan Roughriders head into St. Louis to play the Battlehawks, and like it just add a whole different element. I mean, I loved the XFL uniforms. You still have the CFL, like pretty modern, but also some rich history there. And I mean, fuck, I'm all for it if it's like what you just described. I'd love that. And if it ends up being just that they share ideas, and that's cool too, and if they're able to support each other financially, however that looks, we just want Canadian football to watch. I want to go to a Riders game, and whether I'm watching them play the Tampa Bay Vipers, the Seattle Dragons, or the Calgary Stampeders, I just want to watch Canadian football. So that's I think that's where we'll leave that. Ozzy, any closing thoughts on that?
I'm right there with you, Steve. I was talking with Shay about flying to Montreal this year to watch a game if COVID allowed us to. And while COVID might allow us to, I don't know if the CFL is even going to have a year this year. So need to get that going. But
worst case scenario, you can always fly to Texas and just catch a Rangers game in a sold out crowd. So we'll save that for another time though. Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at SteveBullen22. You find me on Instagram at SteveBullen_. Zach will be back in the next couple of weeks. You can find him on Twitter at Zach Foth. Again, he's super fucking lucky. He doesn't have to include an underscore and number there. Just got his name. You can find him on Instagram at Zach Foth_. Wasn't so lucky on that app. Ozzy, where can the fine folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at AustinPaul_. That's Austin with a Y, not an I. Not an I.
Lots to catch up on, guys. We have some really cool interviews lined up over the next month and a half here. We mentioned Tomac before the draft, finalizing one for next week and potentially at the end of March too. Really excited to bring those guys on, and be sure to keep tabs on us. Thank you for everyone who participated in our first giveaway. Not really our first giveaway, but our first, I guess it was kind of our first giveaway.
It's our first giveaway with the new amateur agency.
With the new amateur agency apparel. There's going to be more where that came from. So make sure you're following the amateur agency on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the amateur agency. And if you're watching on YouTube, you already know where to find us, but we also have a YouTube. Check us out, the amateur agency. Majority of our Third and Wrong episodes are there now. We'll be back next week. Thank you. Godspeed.